So hi everyone. Uh, from initially, first of all, thanks for the U.S. Latin Art Forum for inviting me to participate in CHARLA, which I extended the invitation to talk and converse with my great friend and colleague Alina Maldonado, which is a musician and now also like sound art, visual artist from Tabasco, Mexico. And yeah, we're here to talk a little bit about, I guess, initially the works we have collaborated in. I'm a visual artist. I work mostly with sculpture since the last 10 years, but in the last couple of years, I really got interested in sound and like ephemeral practices. So I started like sort of coincidence working with Alina, and yeah, I wanted to invite her for this charla so we can talk a little bit about how we sort of have collaborated through these projects, that a lot of them touch you know, concerns around different themes around sound, but I think also you know, each personal interest. But I just think it's really nice to revise how, you know, how it has been to collaborate between us, and then the, you know, how different subjects around sound bring us together. But I'll let Alina present uh, herself before we start. So
Okay, hi. Okay, thank you, Ulrik, for inviting me. Well, yeah, we started like collaborating. I guess it's been like 3 or 4 years now, and somehow, yeah, it's because I I've been feeling like attracted to the idea of exploring sound outside musical structures. So yeah, I've been looking uh, forward like to make sound installations and to explore how it is that sound travels in space somehow, and how spaces affects the way we listen and how we experience sound by itself.
and can you tell for everyone who will watch this a little bit about like, well, I mean, I already said you're from Tabasco, but like where you study, like where you were, like got sort of like your musical background, a little bit about that, and then yeah, I think that'd be good.
Yeah, I mean, I come like from a classical background. I play violin, and yeah, I studied like classical violin for a lot of years, and then I began like doing free improvisation, and somehow it gave me like this idea of exploring sound and not only like making music. So, but somehow I still like bring all this background and all this like musical knowledge to all these explorations I make. But in order like to really not just like making music, but like trying to make questions about what music is, and how is it that we perceive sound, how is it that we relate to sound, and how we are somehow like our perception, our own like gender, race is always there in the way we are perceiving sound. And somehow I'm constantly trying like to go out like from the idea I have of what music is. So yeah, and that's one of the reasons I'm constantly like looking for ways to to explore just sound by itself. Even when I play violin, I'm like constantly doing things that are not quite musical. So yeah, but Yeah, and so I think about this project we made, that now we have like this record. There is about to finally like yeah, to be released, and so people can hear. But it's been like quite a very like important like process for me, because somehow we went there to this place in Puerto Rico, and we made like some field recordings. Then we came back, and it took, for me, it took like a long time to really know what is it that I want to do with them, you know, because somehow, yeah, it was like, okay, I can make like some kind of musical pieces, but I have all these questions. So how can I somehow like put out like all these questions that I'm making myself, and try to communicate them through music or through sound.
I think that's the best way to sort of like start conversing about how we started working together. Like I remember initially we met at this artist talk about one of his projects, and because I think you had like if I remember correctly, you had like a colleague who had done some music, like edited some music project that he had done, and then we like realized we had a lot of a couple of friends in common, and yeah, like at that moment, I don't remember specifically how or why I was
yeah, I think it was because we were like both interested like in reading Deleuze and this
yes.
post-structuralism, and
yeah. No, you're so right, because I was reading a book about sound, and I knew, because yeah, like I said before, like I come from this very I mean, formal education regarding art from Puerto Rico, and then had been making sculpture for a lot of years, but then yeah, spending time viewing like some new projects and references, I just really thought that it would be interesting to work with immateriality or certain other like forms and traditions of transmitting knowledge that I think are very important in Latin American context. And sound just seemed like a natural way. And I think I went to this talk because it had to do with sort of like a sound project from this artist that doesn't really work with sound. And then we met, and yes, we wanted to like sort of discuss the Leos at that time, and sort of revise also this music book. And then we ended up having this project that I remember that through a grant that I got, I was like, okay, then let's just make this thing, which I recalled as well. It was like a really large, like it was like a year-long process thing, because I knew when we started like trying to read the Leos and Guattari, and also this like text about sound. It was somewhere like sort of like a class thing that we did each week, and then we sort of like geek out and like digest text around these subjects. And then I was like, hey, I got this money, and we had this sort of big idea of something that we wanted to do. And it was like, okay, let's just do it, because like we had like a time frame. I remember that you were free and I was free. But when I think about this project, I always recall or like always mention like an important fact, which I did like very recently, that I had a conversation about this, is that like I remember one of the initial things that we discussed or you talked about was sort of like how I don't know, we read and we had a couple of conversations where you were like, you need to sort of like relearn how to listen. And I bring it up because I think not only in this project, but in things that we're working on right now, the idea of how to listen or where the listening is placed, it's very important. And from the things I had referenced you and showed you, I remember you were like, okay, cool, but the way I approach sound, or one of the ways I understand sound, which would be nice to sort of like revisit now, or you can talk a little bit more about that, is like you need to like, I remember you were like, yeah, but that's like on art and visual art. This is like, for me, the perception or like the idea of art and culture through sound is, it's sort of like, so we have to sort of work on the idea of listening, which I think would be nice if you can maybe just talk a little bit about that briefly before we maybe go into the project in Puerto Rico.
Yeah. I mean, the idea of like relearning to listen, it's been like a very personal process actually, because because being like trained to listen to sounds in a certain way, it's very strong, you know, like it's like even before I get like to really listen to them, I always have like used to have like this idea. Somehow I'm still like always constantly like trying to exercise that, like not doing that, but like I think listening has to be like, somehow I feel like really inspired by Pauline Oliveira's work and all these like deep listening idea that she practiced, like really perceiving sound as it is, even like in some kind of meditation, you know, like when your thoughts come, you let them be and you don't judge them. It's like doing the same with sound. It's like I don't know if it is like a beautiful sound or it's like horrible. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's just like really, really perceiving, not only with our ears, but like trying to recognize where sound is like reaching our body. Mm-hmm. So yeah, like really being like so much more open to how sound come, because it is something that is actually happening the whole time. I mean, and we get like to really be selective, like where we put our attention. So it's the same with listening. So we can approach like sound and really concentrate in one thing that it's happening. You know, it's something that we can do like every day, whenever we want. It's more about like this psychological, I don't know, aptitude, like, mm-hmm. And not taking, I mean, somehow when you start doing that, you start like to recognize that music can actually happen in unexpected places. You know, sometimes, when you pay attention to what's going on around you, you get like to recognize some patterns. And and for my music, sometimes like I don't know, rhythmic rhythms are like inspiration for me. And I know it's not like they are not the idea of what I have of what rhythm is, or musical rhythm. It is like more chaotic, but somehow I think that it is important now that music is everywhere, that we really, really try like to invite people to have other listening to the things that are going on, because I believe that if we really get like to pay attention to what's going on around us, sound can really tell us about a lot of things, like political issues that are going on. It brings like a lot of information actually, but somehow, because we don't have like these like eyelids for our ears, like ears lit.
We're listening all the time.
Mm-hmm, we're listening all the time.
Bringing Pascal already to the
Yeah.
conversation. Yeah, I remember as well that when we started, like, sort of like not only reading together and working together, and there's this drilling going on.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay, I think it's over. Sorry. I think I remember as well that for me something that I was really as well attracted, like in your practice, was that you like improvised a lot, and I got to, I think that's one of like the strongest, like I mean, this last couple of years since I know you, is like when I've seen more improvisation in the last, several years, because I do have several friends that are musicians, but or a couple. But yeah, with you, I was really interested in this idea where you already felt really comfortable in a scenario where like where like improvisation was the main thing, or like the medium in which like things happen, which I think was important, or I think of it as now in like that initial project, because a lot of the things were sort of like solved in the moment, and I mean, we had an idea of maybe what the end of the thing would have been, but it just turned out to be like a whole different thing.
Yeah.
We ended up like not even showing the project, which was sort of like initially what was going to happen, but then like a little bit like now, just like other things around it didn't allow it. Uh, but I want to go back to this quote, that like this important thing that you just said, that sort of brings this big reference for that big project. And I know it's something that I always bring up, or somehow we sort of like, it's like a text that I know we always come. I'm like, there's things we sort of like extract from it. But for an initial project that I'm trying to see if I can pull an image up. Let me.
Yeah. What you just said about improvisation, yeah, it's like somehow like the core of my practice, like because somehow improvisation allows me like to be open to unexpected results. I mean, I know that I may have like an idea of what I want, but yeah, I guess I'm constantly trying like to allow things also like to happen, because I know there are a lot of things that I can't control. So yeah, and don't like yeah, like taking it like, oh no, something went wrong, or yeah, like just bring that into like the process and do something with it, with whatever it is that went wrong or that. So yeah.
Yeah, I did found a couple of images so they could be recorded, and maybe we can talk about this one. I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have it here. So I mean, yeah, this is an image. I don't know how it's being displayed, but yeah, I think this is our first project together. And then to sort of give some context to it, we went, well, first of all, we read this book by, sorry for the drilling, by Pascal Quinard, which is he's a French writer, but he's also like, I don't know how many generations of musicians are in his family. And I had heard about this book called The Hatred of Music, in which he sort of like does a revision of the key roles of sound, and then sound arranged and conceived as music throughout humans history. But even he goes, he references a lot of like mythology, and how uh, the role of sound, even in myths and creational myths, all the way to like how it's used in war, and in the last, for example, World War, and how a little bit how you mentioned as well that now like sound is everywhere, and then like the basis for the title is that you know this thing that for him he used to love and adore is now everywhere, and like you can't escape it. And like when you said that, like our ears don't have eyelids, it comes from like this quote from Kigna, where like sound is that thing that for me initially was very interesting to think of it in that way, that like he mentioned is that to listen is to be first, like one is to be touched at it by a distance, and then like also the link of listening and obedience, and I remember he traces the root of like the Latin word to listen, and then how that's related to obedience. But in the book, there's like an interesting part as well, because there's this mention of the pictograms in caves, and how these are conceived, like the famous ones in France or in Spain, La Croix, and all this, how they're conceived as decorations for instruments. And I mean, at the same time, and I also recall now another reason where like I wanted to sort of like start working with you, or like, I mean, initially just learning from you, because I wasn't clear we're gonna like, be on our third project right now, but I just wanted to learn, because I also like from my own practice that I work a lot with, material cultural production and the fields that study it, mainly archaeology. I found that there was like the relatively youngest, section within archaeology is it's archaeoacoustics, or basically the archaeologists who study sound, which for me was really interesting, because since I'm already like geeking out on researches or objects in our past cultures, not only mine but in other places, but mainly Mexico and Puerto Rico. I was really intrigued about how people would study sounds from the past, because they're gone, and so I thought that learning from you would sort of give me an insight to this. And then a lot of archaeologists of sound have also made this claim about caves and drawings in caves, and how the sound characteristics in caves and their echoes and all of this played a bigger role than just being a place where like they went in and painted. So I remember, like we arrived to this image, and sorry, we arrived to this image, and yeah, basically, maybe you can talk a little bit about it while I mute myself for this sound. But we wanted to make a cave, and the basis of it was we wanted to make and explore this idea of the cave as a large instrument. And through a lot of steps, the end, we just were like, okay, let's just make our own cave. And we went to Puerto Rico and did it.
Yeah, well, I really love like this idea of caves as musical instruments. Yeah, that was like the general like idea of why we went there and made this, yeah, like our own cave. Somehow I guess that we actually didn't get to have like this resonance we actually wanted to, but it was like really interesting, like to get all these sounds from that place, and really get like to hear how it was under being there, like and yeah, well, I think also the idea of like of the night, because it was not only like the cave, but it was like not being able to see, and somehow how this idea is related to the night. And somehow also Pascal says in this book that that sound or music somehow belongs to the night, or to, yeah, to something that we cannot see. So I think, and also he relates sound to another world, like perhaps some kind of magical world. And I think so. I mean, I think that because sound has like this power to affect us, yeah, in ways that we don't even like know. So, and this is an idea that somehow I think we try like to get into the record.
Yeah.
Like, and also like getting these sounds that might be strange and that we don't know where they come from. No, like we were there like exploring, and but I think it's interesting like to, yeah, like to take sound from their visible like origin. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that that was something that we somehow tried to, yeah, to do there. I don't know.
Yeah, we like I mean, not only the cave, but I was trying to search for an image, but we also sort of used you know, this very primitive instrument that if I'm not mistaken, in English they call it bull roar, and which is, you know, like a, I mean, I remember I was interested in it, and we brought it into the project because it was sort of like one of these. It's one of these objects in, you know, again in like in material cultural production, like that has been found in different regions and cultures at different time frames, and cultures that, you know, have had no contact with each other, and then they still all came up with this sort of like same primitive. You know, instrument, which is basically a wooden stick that you swing with a string, and it makes us like a whoozing, like a zooming sound. And I know, I remember we brought it into the project because it had this sort of factor, like of like an axe or a knife. There's like a thing that, you know, sort of like you know, this type of like information that it sits in like the outer world, and then different, you know, people arrive at it at different times. And I also, because I remember, because it sort of like referenced, or it made sense when we thought about this idea of language, because again, Pascal in this book sort of references a myth in which language is created, and I really liked it because it was the moment in which like a character in the myth sees thunder and then hears lightning. I mean, sorry, the other way around. He sees lightning and then he hears thunder, and sort of like that idea of image and sound and from the same like thing, you know, build language. And at the time for me, it made like, it was important and symbolic because I thought it was like sort of like the way we were working, especially in that one, because we were, you know, I don't have any formal education in sound, and I was working with you and like trusting then your skills and abilities, and then, you know, I'm trying to set like, for that project example, I tried to set like certain parameters, like yes, there is documentation, the one that we showed right now, but at the end, like you mentioned before, like at the end we just made an album, which is now gonna sort of like um, debuted and spread. But like I remember that, yeah, that idea of like sound and an image sort of created a thing. So for me, even though now, you know, it's been a couple of years since we started that, I think it's very important because it just, or like the times I've showed that project and mentioned it, and people tell me like, well, how have you showed this project or this work? And since we've never technically had, because we did have a venue at some point, but then there was an earthquake, and that sort of venue had to close. But then I remember, for me, or at least I think it was like a very important way in which, you know, like we sort of like started learning, you know, how to collaborate, or the things we were interested in, and how to sort of go around it and not worry, which was really nice, not worry of like, okay, what are we gonna show? How many photos or like sound? Blah, blah, blah. It was more of like going into this really strange. I mean, we went to Puerto Rico to like this town and in the middle of Puerto Rico, make this thing which is sort of like in a land artist, land art tradition way. We dug this thing with machines and blah blah. And then we just had our hole and we're like, okay, let's just make some recordings. And I remember we like scratched the walls with some sensors.
Mm-hmm.
At some point we had like friends reading things like text inside with like a campfire in it. I mean, I think it was really fun in the sense that it was like very learning experience, and we didn't really have to worry until now that we have like, hey, we have finally the album, which hopefully will the people at Charla can put the link, and people who want can check it out and listen. But yeah, for me, I think it was like a very important exercise of just doing things together without having like a day or like a venue. And then and now it's the opposite, like now we're doing like other things that is like, oh my god, we need to figure out how to show this. Yeah, for me, like mentioning that project, it was really like important, and I mean, I think we can, I guess, go like a lot into depth into it, like all of this quotes that you did mention about Pascal and the night, all this relationship, or all of these interesting things that he brings about. But yeah, I think it was very enriching in that sense, and I think it's sort of like, for me, it's also interesting. I don't know if you see it that way, or maybe it's a good transition to maybe talk a little bit about what we're doing now, because that one I think touched on a really sort of like more universal sort of like idea of, or like it's sort of like it arranged caves and cave as an instrument, but not a specific cave or a specific. And we used an instrument that had this sort of like multiplicity of references to times and cultures. And then now we sort of like transition, or like I like knocked on your door again to be like, hey, I kind of want to try this, and I think like it'd be interesting to do it together, but it has like a very specific root, and it addresses like more directly other things that I think Pascal and other writers and references for us bring, but it's more on like addressing like a specific sort of issue within sound and sound culture and like pre-Hispanic music versus Western world music. But
well, about what you just said about our first collaboration, I think somehow it was our first experience like doing this, and I think it became like this. For me, it's like a long-term relationship, and I think we have like, because it's not just like we collaborate, and we also have like this friendship, and I think that's important too. I mean, at least for me, it's something that when we work is there, and of course we also now like when we see the experience and not having like this like idea or where we going to go, allowed us like to really be open and explore, and to bring like our interests and find like this one point of union. And I think, of course, now we are somehow a little bit more mature, maybe in our own processes, and this new project that we are doing. Somehow, I think we both have like this idea, more clear idea of what we want. I think for me, for example, it is a great opportunity like to really explore non-Western toning, and to really somehow it opened a door for me, like to really look into my own context, you know, like and discover that there is a lot of like a strong tradition that somehow has been like covered with all these European tradition of what music should be. But yeah, of course, pre-Hispanic music is a very, very microtonal tradition, musical tradition. So yeah, just like I don't know, Arabic scales, or I don't know, like these Middle East like musical traditions, Indian, and that has like a very strong like I don't know, like yeah, like it's so different like to the 12 tones we are so used. And I think that now yeah, in this project we actually like get to explore these things, you know, like really, but with a stronger like idea of the way we are like walking.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Well, and for this project, we've well, you introduced me to Samuel Martí,
Yeah.
who is this was this was he like was
I mean, before we go maybe into that, I just
okay.
wanted to show the just me, yeah, just before maybe we move into that, the maybe the you know, the end, like how the cover of the disc, maybe just pop that image up real quickly. I mean, at the end, that project we titled, you know, ver las voces, escuchar el fuego, which sort of translate to seeing the voices, listen. I mean, listening to the
yeah,
seeing
the fire,
the voices, listening to the
see,
fire. Or no, I'm mixing it up. Sorry.
Yeah, see the voices, listen to the fire. Yeah. Or
so yeah, at the end, that was sort of like the title of the project. This is sort of like you know, the image of that, which turned out to be sort of like a music compilation. And then yeah, now we sort of like I think now we're like moving more into like I would say more of, again, to like a very research but also like improvised experienced way of sort of working. I don't know, when you mentioned I mean, the clear element of friendship, which I think it's, I mean, for me, it's also very important. And it makes me think of, like, for example, this artist and friend, Beatriz Santiago Munoz. And I know she finished sort of like recording part of like her like biggest movie, longest movie, which I think, I mean, now last time I talked to her, it was like 4 hours long, but I think she's just gonna keep adding. But I remember in her acknowledgments, or like this idea of like how all of these things come together, she really acknowledges this idea of friendship and somehow how you know all the things that happen and have happened. I've you know have been possible and have, you know, come about and through all of that through friendship. So I think that's it's really important as well to mention it. But and then also this idea of sort of like the experience of improvisation, I bring it back because even though, yes, I did invite you, or like I sort of proposed that we sort of work this project together, which is the one we're currently, like one of the current ones that we're doing, which sort of like addresses this interest around flutes and a specific type of pre-Hispanic flute. It addresses this thing that you were mentioning about, you know, pre-Columbian music and sort of like that perception of sound versus Western standards, which for me, yes, the project I think will address all of that, but I think we also meet and coincide in this idea of, or like starting to questioning these ideas about beauty standards, like, you know, aesthetic standards, which I've learned a lot, or I experienced a lot in the sense of you know, when I've seen you improvise, and I recall all of the session, I think that's like a really great exercise to sort of like open your mind and to perceive, you know, not only music, but what other like aesthetics experiences can be and how you read them and experience them, and then challenge this idea of like, oh yeah, something harmonic, then it's very well constructed, blah, blah, blah. So I think initially it tries to sort of like, or like in a very, very like several layers, we are sort of addressing that, but it sort of like jump starts from like being like, oh wow, these flutes were found in this region, and then, you know, we start crashing on the surface of that, and then we ended up going recently to several like archaeological sites in the Gulf and Peninsula of Mexico, the Gulf of Mexico, the Yucatan Peninsula, and then we just went out to record sounds and sounds that might not be there, but I think it was it's a very rich and sort of like fertile playground within collaboration, or at least between us, because I feel it this way. I don't know, like if you can describe it in another way, but like now that we just recently went there, yeah, I feel like, you know, there is a structure and a basis and like some interest and some elements, but then we just, you know, went to have an experience there, and then we stumble upon like which places have what, and like, you know, elements in architecture, and then and truly like have an experience of like this the sound landscapes that are there, and in a way which is very different from like other practice that I have, which I don't know if you can also talk about that, like within your like own personal work as well. It's something that's very different, right? I feel that there's something really interesting that happens when I think about like art making. Sometimes when I do make certain work, I go like, oh yeah, I can think about it and plan it, and I see it as it comes about. But when we work together, which is something I enjoy a lot, it's like, I think, you know, there's something very important, or like there's a very heavy part of the art itself that it happens when we're there, and then how to transcribe it really hard, but not maybe that important, or like, okay, how are we gonna show or display, blah blah. But there's something really happening in that like sort of like improvised like approach to things, where I think happen like art for me in a very interesting way happens there. But I don't know how you feel in terms of like your own work, how we've arrived to these places, and yeah, maybe you can talk a little bit about that. That'd be great.
Okay. Yeah, I totally agree with the idea of all the things that happen during the process are part of the piece, or whatever it is that we are going to show people. Because yeah, I don't think that art is just about like the result. It's also about like all the things that happen when you are doing it. And yeah, because now we are like in this moment where when yeah, we it has like a lot of value, like the results And yeah, I think we have like to, I don't know if we have, but I like to know more about the problems, the things that might not go result very well.
How do you feel like when, I don't know, when we've been working in these projects, and then, I don't know, I feel it'd be interesting to know, like, how do you feel when, you know, you're clearly in a venue, I don't know, like, can't recall the last time because of this world situation that I saw you improvise, but it was a couple of months ago. How does that, you know, how that experience then sort of like translate, or like how do you find that it's sort of like similar or different, or like, you know, specifically in this way that you mentioned, that like, you know, art in one sense happens in between that thing, and then, and yeah, not only in the end or the presentation, because yeah, the way, you know, like most of like what, you know, contemporary art or visual art that's consumed is like you find that like there's an end product, or you go on exhibition and you view something, which is not necessarily all of it, but we're clear that like a lot of it, it's sort of like that. And even though there's things happening when you view things or experience things, I think, yeah, when I go see you improvise, it's like a, you know, it's like a very completely different visceral experience. And I don't know how do you feel those two sort of like relate or not, or yeah.
Okay, I feel they're very different experiences, because when I improvise, you know, I know it is an experience that will fade. You know, it's all about being present. It's all about being there in the moment, in the place, and somehow I feel that when I'm working with you, especially now, we have like to get somewhere, and somehow we may have to like show people what happened, and that space, that when you translate all this rich experience and just like try to give people or share with people what is it that happened, I think that's like the process I feel more similar to improvisation. I think that moment when we really get like to like, somehow for me it's like when we are sharing ideas, or we are somehow like improvising, you know, like, because I think that improvisation is like having a conversation, actually. Like, we listen to what other people have to say, and somehow it might resonate with you, how you feel, and you give some kind of answer. So I think, but one of the things I feel about like visual arts, or yeah, is that there is this expectation about like the object, you know, and that's where I feel it's very different, because you get to know the experience, or like something about that experience, but in another point in time, you know. So I think, but I really like it. I mean, I think I feel this is two different ways of doing something, or sharing like an experience with people. I don't know if I'm explaining myself, but yeah, you know,
no, I think it's very, I mean, it's very true in that sense. Like, I also feel like, I mean, when I recently, the projects that I've shown, or like now the things that we're doing together, and even the album, you know, I think it's like it's just something that how do you call it? I think it's like sort of like a compromise, you know, like of, okay, yes, we have to present and we have to show.
Mm-hmm.
And out of all of the things that happen and all of these experiences that like, especially now that like, for me in the projects that I'm doing with you, or like I'm also not only work with sound, but like I've done a couple of things and doing a couple of things with dance, which I think is also like sort of addresses the same, you know, field of like other means which are like in the moment and present, of how to translate, you know, an experience and emotions and knowledge and feelings and all of this. Um, yeah, I think the way that we show, or I mean, I think it's a compromise of that experience, which is really hard to, because I think of it in the sense that I don't know, when I remember trying to explain someone the way, you know, how I felt, or like how was an improvisation that I saw, like I saw you do, like one time, like I remember someone asking me like, oh, how was it, like not how was it, like was it good, like in detail.
Yeah.
It was like, wow, how do I explain this thing, which is very like in the moment and present, and like very hard. I mean, especially that's something that I like about sound as well, that, you know, it's very, I mean, it could be very complicated to translate or verbalize into like adjectives in order to like, oh, it was very like, it's just something that like, you know, communicates to me, or the times that I've been there, and it like, you know, gives me an experience and like information and emotions that like are really hard to translate to someone else. But also like sort of like replicate again and again, which I think is something that uh, I, I I find interesting. Yeah, yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Maybe it's because improvisation has like this it's like, how do you explain someone like when you are in a ritual, you know, because what's going on, it's very about the energy, because improvisation is not just about like showing off what you can do. I mean, it's not like, oh, I'll play very pretty well, or no, you're actually like doing something with the people who's there listening, and with the people you're playing with. It's more about with the plays, you know, because it's very different when you play like in a big space with a great resonance, or when you are really like trying to
Totally.
yeah, to
Totally.
sound. And
I'm really glad that you say that, like that ritual thing, because even though it's a different type of ritual, I mean, first of all, I think it's nice because it's like clearly another like perception or conception of like what ritual can be, not this like clear reference of what we have. And then I like it because then I also sometimes think this, I also think this thing that you mentioned of like how the experience is not only like an object, but like the conversations that we have, the things we view, this like the short like quotes that we send to each other, all of this. And then when we're in a place like the project that we're sort of working on right now, and I think it'd be good to sort of like address it, or like I'm gonna sort of like speak about it a little bit, because I know we should like wrap up maybe after this. I mean, this project specifically. But yeah, now that we like went through all of this like sites and recorded, there's also like a very ritualistic thing there, in which like the way we, again, like for me it's like an element of improvisation on like but yeah, it sort of can have this sort of like feeling of ritual as well. And yeah, to sort of give it a little bit of context, I sort of like stumble upon this sort of two types of flutes, which I mean, I know we talked about the flutes and before in the past, and I think for me it's a very interesting like object to address, because it has the same quality as the bull roarers that I mentioned last time. Like not only like one of the oldest instruments found are flutes, but they're it's like thing that everyone has. Like even though we're like really clearly working like with one in a specific context in Mesoamerica, I know, or for me, it's clear that like it's sort of like a proto instrument that you can find in different cultures in places. Uh, but yeah, I was very intrigued about again the sort of like notions that Pascal Quinar has sort of like very addressed about like the potentiality of sound as something that invokes and touches things. So, and again, working with these types of objects, I mean, we've each other been to museums and things, and archaeological collections that we have to view everything through glass, and we cannot have an interaction with objects. And they've always suspected that sound is a way to sort of touch these things, but also like bring them back or like take them out of this sort of like solemn state. So what we're doing for the project right now is we're sort of like addressing this type of flutes that were found, some in the valley, like center of Mexico, but most of them are like from Mayan origins. They're like 4 to 3 tube flutes. But it's mostly a concern of like, yes, remaking a couple of these instruments that we're working alongside a ceramist who specializes in this type of clay instruments. We already did and visited the sites, as we mentioned, did a couple of recordings, documentation. And now the main idea of premise of the project was sort of to like retake this replicas of this object, because it's really almost impossible to get originals and take them back to their like place of origin, and just play these instruments, which, as you mentioned, Samuel Martí, it's like this new figure that we're sort of like studying, and like he mentions in one of his texts, like which I think is clear for both of us, like it's like we don't know what the music from that time was, so it's like a futile exercise to go there and like try to recreate that. But I think for a more important part of the project is to see what initially happens when we take those sounds back and those sort of like objects back to these places, and what happens, because a lot of these places as well, they're like they're not places of activity, they're not in the city. We're basically making music in ruins, which is like a very interesting thing in itself as well, or like a very like in that sort of like pilgrimage that we were in that first sort of trip. It was like we went from one ruin to another to like initially record, but now we're just gonna go one ruin to another to play music or just sounds. So that's where we're currently at, but I think it's very interesting to think of it as a ritualistic, like a ritual practice.
It is because maybe music was something very different. The music is now, because it was played in very specific moments. Now it is totally different. I mean, we have access to it like everywhere, whenever we want. So I think taking this like essence of music, because an improvisation is very related to this essence of music. That is because when you're improvising, you are allowing music to be like you. It's not you, it's like you actually are allowing like for it to manifest. So I want to believe that it is something that people used to think before, when it was not something that you had access everywhere. It was something that it was very special, like usually it was played in very important moments, in celebrations.
There's a house, I forget the name right now, but I think I sent you that at some point. There are specific houses, not only Mayan culture, but also like Mexica culture or Nahua, like there were like specific you know, houses of
Mhm.
people who would teach, you know,
Music.
people music and dance and you know, singing
Of,
as an as an intrinsic part of you know, like
of,
of
of life.
of life and of culture, like identity.
Of course, because it is somehow or was this kind of self-expression, but like not just like individuality, but like for something bigger, you know, it was connected like to some kind of sacred thing. So it was very important to learn it and somehow to keep uh, a tradition alive. I guess that these kind of schools were made for that, like to really pass this knowledge to the new generations, um,
Yeah, and
and
I
to really
yeah, sorry, go.
to know like the value of it, you know, not
Yeah.
just like, oh, okay, we are learning to dance just because, oh, it's so beautiful, but because it is meaningful.
No, for sure. I mean, I think of it in I mean, I think of two things when you say this. One is yes, sort of like I think this. I mean, I think at the end, all of this sort of like reaffirms or reaffirms this this, you know, like a sub layer, or like it doesn't have to be the main thing that we project. There's clearly, yes, a concern that you mentioned about, you know, microtonal music, and like I said before, like, you know, I try to question myself, like when I do this type of works, or like when we're in this type of like research type of like ritual, you know, how much of the like what I perceive as aesthetics or values is really shaped by like another standard that was clearly imposed historically. But then also when I think about this project specifically, because I've sort of like had recent, you know, discussions about it, or showed it to a couple of other colleagues, because it's still very much in the works. I mean, I'm showing an image now of us recording in Hot Club, but I think a lot about it as well, because I mean, I think the cave has a lot of projects, a lot of other possibilities. But when I work specifically with like cultural material production from the past, it's not because that's the main concern or interest. Or when I, you know, I ask you to come and like and be like, hey, there's this interesting thing that I might get like some budget and I want to do it with you. It's not to sort of like reminisce or like have a nostalgic aspect. I also think about it in many ways. And when we're working on it, I really see like all of the potentials to talk about not only the present but like possibilities of the future. Like uh, yeah, because I think of a lot of these things that I'm interested in. You know, like there's still flutes around, and there's people who play flutes, and I mean, it may not be the biggest instrument right now, but it's clearly something that like it's in a way doesn't have like a real time frame. I mean, or it sort of break this idea of like a linear time, which I'm really interested in, or like try to address. So that's something that I also like when we're doing this, or like now something that really excites me about this project is like it clearly has some elements that people tell me, oh, then do you want to, you know, address? Do you guys want to address this idea about like colonialism, or like these sites? What happened? Did they fall like at the time, you know, that we were, you know, sort of like invaded or conquered? And a lot of them are not even from that time frame. But for me, it's more of like how a lot of these objects, even though they are clearly from what we consider the past, uh, I think they're very interesting ways in which we address, you know, even things that we're talking about right now, you know, like what is improvisation? Uh, how is that like affected or permeated by the place where you're at, the people that you're doing it with, and how that only not like how not only that happens in like art, it happens in like other scenarios in which like human beings connect and interact. So for me, that has like a very important value that like I don't know. In some ways, I even think about like you know, the type of music that you mostly do, and you know, like now in the present, that you use like, you know, tools from the moment and address certain things that it like interest you, like in terms of like, I don't know, gender or politics or you know, all of these things. I think, I mean, I think we address them in ways through these type of projects, even though like, yeah, objects are from a couple hundred years, years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think that bringing those subjects back, well, to this time, it's like bringing them to life and somehow giving meaning to them, or relate to them in new ways, but somehow, because we are not trying to like know exactly how it was, or just like you said, how music was made, yeah, before the colony, and but I think that having this like knowledge of what happened, and somehow like looking at it in a critical way and making questions, I think that's something that is valuable. You know, it's not like trying to bring the past to the present, but like trying to create new relationships to those things and asking questions to those things that right now are important to us, you know, through those subjects. Yeah.
I guess I'm gonna wrap it up because I know we could be like talking longer, and we have to actually talk very soon for the things that are coming up in the following weeks. But yeah, I mean, I wanna give thanks to you, Alina, for you know, having some time to talk with me and to share, you know, a little bit of like our work, or sort of like the, you know, the way we've been jamming the last couple of years. And thanks to Charla for the invitation, and yeah, hopefully y'all, a lot of people will see the outcome of like or I mean this upcoming project, and future ones that I'm sure will come about. But yeah, thanks, Alina.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, we'll talk soon. And yeah, I think hopefully we can share through the foundation and Charla, not only your, you know, your work, but the things that will come up, so people can find out and listen. So yeah, thank you very much, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.